Brilliant. Good morning, everyone. We'll just get started if everyone would like to take their seats. This is all very exciting. We've got quite a lot of people in the room, which is great to see. It's great to be back here physically. It's the first thing physically that we've hosted for a good 18 months. And yeah, at least 50 people in the room, so that's absolutely smashing. So thank you very much for leaving your bedrooms and your living rooms. Hopefully today, just to start with, obviously we're recording today, we're streaming, so there are some people who are joining us online, so please no swearing. This should hopefully be available afterwards to everyone as a recording as well, so you can go back and look at it. Today's Zero Emission Bus Workshop is all about knowledge sharing, it's about networking, it's about understanding the challenges with the introduction and the transition to zero emission buses, and learning how we can overcome those challenges with both technology solutions and operational solutions as well. So it's great to be here in Glasgow. I'm just going to give you a quick tour through from a national policy perspective, so touching on some funding, how we're all doing in terms of number of vehicles, some of the stuff that Zemo's doing as well, just in the background. Then we'll have presentations from McGill's, Kapelko and Zenobe. And then after that, we'll have a Q&A session, so we'll save the questions till the end. We've got a little a top table here, so we'll take questions in the session. Should be about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on how many questions you guys have got. And then what we'll do is we'll all jump on McGill's buses. We've got two. There's also a coach outside, an electric coach, so that's brilliant. And then we'll come back here for lunch. So you feel free to leave your bags and coats here, although the Glaswegian weather is treating us to its traditional greyness. Brilliant. So without further ado, I'll just jump straight in. My name is Dan Hayes. I head up the bus working group. I've also got my colleague Tim Griffin here today, who's supporting me now on the bus work. Just for some of you who aren't members, who don't know what Zemo do, we used to be called the Low Carbon Vehicle Partnership. We had to change our name in line with the net zero ambitions to Zemo. Zemo doesn't actually stand for anything, it's just a feeling. We are, though, a public-private partnership, so we get a grant from the Department for Transport primarily, although we work closely with Transport Scotland, as well as OZEV, Ofgem, BEIS, more and more. And we have a wide range of different stakeholders that come to us and engage with us, from vehicle manufacturers, fleet operators, technology providers, fuel suppliers, all the way around to local authorities and academia as well. And the whole idea is that we try to inform policy to accelerate the shift to now net zero transport. The idea is that we try and inform policy and basically improve the policy that exists already. We have five major working groups and then a collaborative initiative function as well. So we've got bus and coaches, which I head up. We've also got cars, fuels, commercial vehicles, and energy infrastructure. Those are all looking at various things, and I'll touch a little bit on what all those different groups are doing in a little bit, but jumping straight into what we do in the bus sector. We've been working with government for over a decade now, developing testing and accreditation schemes to support funding schemes that come out. So government has a testing and certification method to make sure that the vehicles and the vehicles that they fund through grant schemes, do what they say on the tin effectively. So you can go onto our website, you can look at different manufacturers' test certificates. There you can see the development over time. 10 years ago, we were looking at hybrids. Low carbon emission bus was the standard. Some of you may know the BSOG 6 pence per kilometre in England. That's what the test is to this day. And over time, we've developed the testing. We've made sure that funding went from not only the vehicles, but to infrastructure as well, which is a key piece to all of this. And we slowly tweaked it up from low carbon emission bus, low emission bus, ultra low emission bus, and now on to zero emission buses over time. And as you can see, quite a large amount, over £300 million has been given out, both by the DfT and Transport Scotland, to support buses over the last decade become cleaner and greener. The focus is now, of course, net zero. We've got net zero ambitions in Scotland for 2045, 2050 for the whole of the UK, and particularly for the bus sector. Scotland has come out and said they want to phase out the majority of diesel buses by 2023, and England has a 4,000 zero-emission bus target by 2025. So there's great ambitions there. There's also London aiming for 9,000 zero-emission buses by 2034 now at the latest, although they'd like to do that as early as 2030. There is now available the zero-emission bus regional areas in England and the ScotZeb Fund, which is open here in Scotland. I don't, unfortunately, have any announcements to make around the Zebra scheme. We were expecting the DfT to announce Zebra winners sometime in September, but I think the reshuffle and obviously the party conferences, which are ongoing at the moment, has slightly delayed that, but hopefully they'll have something before COP would be my best guess. There's obviously 50 million to come in January, February time as well. I think what's important to note is that at least 3, potentially 4 of the major UK bus operators have also started to match the ambition of government. So they've made announcements for fully zero-emission bus fleets by sort of 2035, 2030, and giving you about a 12-year transition for the vehicle fleets. So it's not only the government's ambition, but it's been now matched by industry, which is quite phenomenal. And clearly the focus at the moment is on zero. Some upcoming policy changes. DfT have announced that there's going to be a 22 pence per kilometre uplift for zero-emission buses in England. We're going to expect a consultation on the end of non-zero-emission buses in the next few months. So that's a consultation effectively on the phase-out date of diesel buses, which again adds to this impetus around zero. There's going to be a call for evidence on coaches and minibuses if you're interested in that as well. We're expecting a full BSOG consultation for England this winter, and there have been some suggestions that the DfT will start to look to funnel money through the bus service improvement plans rather than hosting competition rounds, which no one is particularly fond of. But that's just thinking at the moment, but I thought I'd flag that up for you today. In terms of how Scotland's doing, in terms of its zero-emission bus rollout, there are about 58 zero-emission buses in service today, and there are further 260 with funding available. So as you can see from the graph there, in Glasgow, going to have well over 200 zero-emission buses potentially by the end of 2023. That would total 316 zero-emission buses in the whole of Scotland, which represents about 7% of the fleet here. So it's not an insignificant number, particularly with £50 million more being potentially awarded in the next year or so from the ScotZeb round. FYI, the slides will be available afterwards as well. This just shows you the whole of the UK, and just I'm trying to highlight here that it's not just the major towns, it is all over the UK. There are rural places like Orkney where they're actually rolling out zero-emission buses, but everywhere from London to Brighton all the way up here in Scotland. So by the end of next year, by the end of 2023, Glasgow could have the 3rd largest zero-emission bus fleet in the whole of the UK. So that's going to be quite an achievement, I think. But obviously London is one that's pushing the boundaries. They've already got almost 600 zero-emission buses, mostly electric, but some hydrogen there as well. This graph just shows you how the trend has changed over time. So the main green block at the back is all of new bus registrations, so those primarily diesel, and then the green bar at the bottom just shows you electric buses being registered. So actually last year, a total of 60% of all the buses that were registered were actually electric, but that's of course because lots of people cancelled their diesel orders. So it's going to be interesting to watch what happens this year. But you can see in 2019 it was roughly 10% of the market, and that's way ahead of where the car market is, or was then. Some of the other work that Zemo are doing, we're looking at the well-to-tank pathways for hydrogen. So obviously low carbon hydrogen is extremely important in the greenhouse gas savings of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. We've developed a zero-emission bus accreditation scheme. We're working with the DfT on the plug-in truck grant, and we're going to try and take as much of the learning from bus into truck, and try and get them to learn from all of the mistakes that we've made in the bus industry. We've got an E10 checker that we developed, so if your car is potentially compatible or incompatible with E10, we also developed that. We're also looking at retrofitting or repowering existing diesel buses to to zero emission as well. So we're trying to develop the CIVRA scheme that was developed for the clean air zones and the low emission zones here in Scotland, and develop that for particularly for zero emission repowers. And we're also looking at long-term life cycle analysis. So what is the impact of embedded carbon in batteries? What impact does battery swapping have on the total life cycle of zero emission buses as well? Just some upcoming events. We've got Fuels, Commercial and a Bus Working Group coming up, so feel free to go on our website and sign up for those. Interestingly as well, we've got a life cycle analysis workshop looking at EV batteries. It's quite a good lineup there on the 27th of October. That's free for members and non-members to join. So again, go via the website. The final point I'd like to make before passing on to Ralph is shifting from petrol and diesel combustion engines to efficient zero-emission technologies with low carbon, hopefully net zero carbon energy is going to be extremely important in reaching net zero. However, really in order to get there, we're going to have to transition a large amount of people out of private cars and into public transport. And I think that's where hopefully the sustainable bus operation can come from, transitioning people out of private cars, particularly in city centres. And that's where I feel like low emission zones, clean air zones, although originally very much targeting buses and coaches, in the long term I believe they can be developed to support modal shift and encourage people out of cars and into buses, which should long term increase patronage. So that's me. Thank you very much for listening to that initial thing. I'd now like to pass over to Ralph Roberts, who's going to tell us a bit more about why he's, there you are, Ralph, sorry, why you've chosen to electrify your fleet.
Yeah, thanks. I'm now going to terrify the projectionist by putting my glass next to the laptop. Thanks very much, Daniel. Thanks everyone for coming here today, and thanks to Zemo for organising this. It's great to have a face-to-face gathering, isn't it? After nearly 2 years of video conferences, and it's great to have video conference now as part of our daily diaries. It really makes a difference to be face-to-face and be able to have conversations, because that's the thing that I've missed personally. When you go to an online conference, you just can't get that sidebar chat. You can't have you can't just chew the fat about things. So, middle one, Dan, is it?
To the right.
To the right, okay. McGill, striving towards net zero. How did we start this journey? We started by looking at the problem. What is the problem? Bus is a green form of transport in any event. This was our opinion. Now I'm talking about McGill's here. We feel that bus is green, and the way to get bus greener is to get more people on it. That's maybe old thinking now, but that was our opinion. If you look at this graph on the screen, this was released September by Scottish Government, pithily titled as Decarbonising the Scottish Transport Sector. And there you can see roughly 30 years of progress or lack of progress in terms of emissions from the various sectors within transport. Now, bus makes up just under 5% of transport emissions. And for people in the bus industry, that isn't a big problem. There are bigger fish to fry, if you like. If you look at progress over the last 30 years, car has made no progress, in spite of all of the various emissions improvements that you've got over the period from 1990, right all the way up to Euro 6 and Euro 4 for petrol. And that's largely because cars are larger and cars are doing more miles, and there are more cars on the road. And car ownership has gone up, and car ownership has become cheaper. It's ubiquitous. In terms of truck, it's largely the same, and that's down to economic activity and increased mileage. And again, that's in spite of better emissions. So one's netting off the other. Bus, on the other hand, has roughly halved, almost halved, in terms of emissions. Now, some of that is down to mileage reductions, but mileage reductions haven't caused that much. It's down to cleaner vehicles, over-investment in the fleet. The average bus will live for about 15 years, so it means you're replacing 12% of the fleet per annum. And there's been over-investment if you look at the last 5 or 6 years in Scotland, and I must stress that these are Scottish numbers. It's hard when you can. It's great when you can see people's faces when you're presenting. Presenting in an online conference, you can't see anyone's faces, so it's very difficult to see whether what you're saying is being accepted, not accepted, understood, or even if eyebrows are going up. But then when you look at car, the story is completely different. Car has just, van. Van has grown. Van has grown exponentially, and there's lots of reasons for that, and we will all understand those reasons. In terms of even just the service industry, coming to houses, coming to businesses, more people in vans taking care of business, high street shop deliveries, supermarket deliveries, online retail, all of the various things that cause vans to go on the road. Those of you that are in the van business will understand, what's happened to van sales over the last 5-10 years. So the bus industry has behaved really well. Even if you look at rail, the rail line on there is just above bus. So if you look at the kind of a pastel green colour, there is in actual fact a faint yellow line there. That's rail. Rail has stayed largely static to slightly increasing over the last 30 years. So buses perform pretty well in traditional terms. So for a bus company, why would you go then and put yourself at risk to all of this new technology, new expense, new learnings, new ways to try and get yourself on the road to net zero? That's a good question. But the answer for us was, why not? Why not do it? There has to be other reasons other than just box ticking, filling manifesto commitments for whoever the government is at the time, what the government's demands are. There has to be more than just box ticking. So we decided that we were going to act now, we were going to do the right thing. We took that as a decision as a board and said, right, let's do it. And it was based on a number of things. So the naysayers, not so much naysayers, but some people in the business were saying, early adoption can be risky. If you're at the tip of the spear, you're always in danger of hitting something hard. You maybe leave it to the big guys, let the big guys do it. They can afford to make the odd mistake with new technology, and we can then learn from that and understand who the best people to partner up with are in terms of infrastructure and vehicles and what's reliable and what's not. But then when you start looking at what you've actually got in the business, in the bus industry, or the heavy transport industry for that matter. You see, the bus industry, and there's not a lot of people here inherently within the bus industry, commercial vehicles aren't buses, and buses are not commercial vehicles. Whilst they can be labelled as such, they are not. Buses are a bit of a cottage industry. A bus is a truck that's been taken apart and put back together in a way that you would never ever do it if you wanted to have a reliable and well-functioning vehicle. It's done for packaging terms and that alone. And really, in all honesty, what buses achieve is really against all the odds, because you take the engine from the front of the vehicle and you stick it at the back where it's hot and dirty and it's got poor access. You sometimes turn it at a right angle to the direction of drive so that you have to use mechanical means to turn the drive, which makes it noisy and inefficient. And then you have to package the rear axle. The drive has to come in and step itself up to get to the wheels, which again makes it noisy and inefficient in order to let passengers get to back seats, unless maybe they're called Sherpa Tenzing and they sit up the back of the bus like this. But you've got an awful lot of stuff going on with packaging, and that's before you get to fuel systems and the inherent heat in there and the fire risk and where you put your cooling systems, because manufacturers or bus builders don't want to run their cooling pipes to the front of the bus. So the radiators are at the back. Well, you've got big rear wheels at the back and you've got a lot of road dirt at the back. When's the last time anyone in this room, show of hands, saw a road sweeper out in the streets? Right, there you go. So the old ways of maintaining roads are pretty much gone because of budget cuts since 2010. So the new reality is that the roads are pretty dirty in actual fact. And if you cycle, you will realise that. I cycle a lot and I realise just how dirty the roads are. Well, all that dirt has to go somewhere when wheels go over it and kick it up, and generally it goes into intake systems in engines and in radiators. Just speak to the engineers in any bus business and they'll tell you where that dirt is, because they've got to wash it out on a regular basis. That causes engine temperatures to be too high and it causes them to be inefficient, unreliable. So just in terms of what you've got, you think, well, wait a minute, maybe actually this is an opportunity. Maybe it's not a threat. Maybe this is actually an opportunity. Let's look at what zero emission can give us. So skills and manpower, that could become a threat. Once we examined it, actually it's not a threat, it's an opportunity. So we've taken the opportunity to go from something like 12 different vehicle makes. If you drive a Volkswagen, you don't put it in a Ford garage, and vice versa. You don't stick a BMW into the local Kia garage because they're not trained on them. The bus industry has to train its personnel on every make, every type, every problem, every eventuality, every diagnostic kit. And that's before you start talking about proprietary units that are used within diesel technology. You go to the manufacturer with a problem and they say, oh, that's ZF. That did that, not us. You know, so you get a lot of blame game stuff going on. With zero emission, there's the opportunity to wash all of that out, upskill your staff for the future so that they feel better about their skill base, they feel better about who they are, what they can achieve, about what future they might have in the industry. They see a future for themselves because they see the world moving over to electric and zero emission vehicles. So that became an opportunity. And then it re-kickstarted and rejuvenated for us the training angle of what we do with our staff, because suddenly we realised we really need to go into more depth here. We were very advanced in terms of a training academy for our driving staff and our platform staff and our customer-facing staff, but in terms of our maintenance staff and our back office staff, we always relied on vehicle manufacturer courses, and we decided, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to have our own academy, own training people, and we're going to take care of it ourselves. Do our own courses and decide what we need and take in the help as we need it. And we used the zero emission journey as a way to do that. So we decided, let's just do the right thing. So that's why I find myself standing here in Paisley, speaking to a bunch of people that have travelled many hundreds of miles to come and listen to me speaking about this. Quite incredible, that in itself. So which direction to take then? That was the next question that we had to answer. You know, do we go with electric? Do we go with hydrogen? You know, which manufacturer do we go with? You know, what kind of driveline do we want? How do we future-proof it? Which partners do we partner up with? You know, in terms of infrastructure and chargers and cables and digging and civils and training and all of the various things. So it's quite clear from the board that Daniel had up there and the people that you're listening to today who our partner choice was. We chose, in the main, two vehicle manufacturers, 3 vehicle types, but the main partner of choice for vehicle was Yutong vehicles imported via Pelican. So Pelican Yutong was the main choice. 55 vehicles with Pelican, all single deck, all 12 metre, all DC charging. We bought 1 vehicle, single deck from ADL, which is just short of 12 metre vehicle. Again, DC charging, battery electric. And then we bought 12 double decks from ADL for our Dundee business, where it's a largely double deck fleet. Again, DC charging. We've majored on DC charging. That's our standard. We wanted that for safety reasons. We felt it was the best way to go. So we chose that as the standard. And it's got the ability to fast charge if we choose to do it. The other partners we chose were Zenobe, who are sitting over here, who don't want to hear me talk about fast charging. But the software that they produce, and that's why we partnered up with them, the solutions that they could bring to the table in terms of the turnkey solution for the infrastructure, battery, charging, management side of things was unparalleled. So the other partners we chose were Zenobe. And one of the great things about Zenobe is the turnkey side of what they can do for you. And that was a big element for us, because we are a sort of big East bus company in our own right, but we're a standalone pretty much. We've got 1,500 employees and 600 and something buses. But we're not a major group with 40,000 employees with the deep pockets that major groups have, where you can afford to have teams of people that do this kind of thing. We all had to do this as well as do the day job, and in actual fact, do the day job in the middle of a pandemic. When you look back and realise what you've achieved over the last 2 years, it's quite incredible. Now, some of the groundwork was done back in 2018, 2019, with demonstrator vehicles, understanding the technology, scoping things out. But the vast majority of this was done, not just by McGill's, but by McGill's partners during a pandemic. So that was difficult to do. But it really should serve as an incentive. You can do pretty much what you want to do as long as you've got the right team round about you. And that's really the big message that I want to leave you with today. You can pretty much do anything you want to do. If you decide you're going to do it, you will be able to do it. There's enough depth in the marketplace in terms of infrastructure, batteries, technology, management companies, vehicle manufacturers, help, advice, consultants. There's enough of all of that out there to let you do what you need to do in terms of zero emission. That's what we found, because we found the journey difficult, but a lot easier than we first imagined it to be. And then when you look at the journey from diesel to electric, all of those potential downsides that I spelled out, the uptime of the vehicle, the reliability of the vehicle should be so much greater. I worked in trains at one time, and you could blindfold any rail engineer and take them into a diesel train workshop or an electric train workshop, and they'll tell you where they are, whether they're in a diesel or an electric workshop. And we're hoping to make that transformation with our bus workshops. They're cleaner, they're more orderly, everything's more programmed. The planned maintenance is a much higher percentage of the total maintenance work that you carry out. Whereas with diesel, you really want it to be up in the 80s, but you're doing well if you've got it down in the 50%, because you need a fleet mix. Our average fleet age is just below 7 years. At just below 7 years, we don't really need to invest. We didn't need to invest so heavily this year the way we did in electric vehicles. And we decided to do it for all of the benefits, not for the box-ticking reasons. That investment was £32 million. Just under £9 million of it came from the government, which is really, really vital assistance. But we still spent 140% more than we would have done had we just bought diesel vehicles. But then we wouldn't have got all of the potential upsides. Ask me in 3 years what those upsides were, really. Because a budget's a budget and reality is reality. But we're really hoping, and from all of the work and all of the analysis we've done, that this reality will come out. In terms of converting to full EV, that's a journey that we're now committed to do, and we want to do it as fast as possible. And it's not just because the government have said, we want 50% of local bus services delivered by zero-emission vehicles by the end of 2023. That came as a surprise to everyone. It first reared its head in May of this year as a manifesto commitment during the election, the Holyrood elections in May this year. And at first we thought it was a typo, within the bus community. We thought, yeah, somebody's going to get their rear end kicked over that one. It wasn't a typo. Local MSPs weren't aware of it. It came as quite a surprise to a lot of people. And then when the government were returned, they made it a manifesto commitment and brought it into being. And in the programme for government that was announced recently, they've decided that by the end of 2023, at least 2,000 vehicles in Scotland need to be zero emission. Now, it's not the same size of problem as you would have in England, where to do the same thing, you're going to have to put something like 20,000 vehicles in. There's roughly 40,000 vehicles in England, 42,000, and about 4,000 in Scotland. But in percentage terms, it's the same issue. It is the same issue. So that is a really, really tough target. And the ScotZeb funding round that Daniel mentioned there, £50 million, ScotZeb won, changed it from SULEBs to ScotZeb just to keep us on our toes. And, they've changed how they're going to fund it and do it. That would see me cascading out Euro 6 vehicles. Not Euro 6 vehicles that we've converted to Euro 6, Euro 6 vehicles that were bought Euro 6. We'd have to convert them out. So what are the chances of someone wanting to buy a second-hand diesel bus in today's environment? Pretty slim, I would have thought. However, we're committed and we're going to do it, if at all possible. In terms of performance, experience to date, you just need to look out that window there and you'll see every 3 or 4 minutes one of our electric buses passing by. We've only got 22. There's another 4 coming in end of the week, another 4 coming in on Monday, and another 4, and they're coming up in force. So they'll all be in place by the 1st of November for COP26, so that we can put a ring of electric vehicles around the SEC in Scotland. But what's our experience to date? It's been very good. We are happy with our choice of manufacturer, because that manufacturer listened to what our requirements were. All through a pandemic where we couldn't go and visit the factory, everything was done by video. There were some quite interesting discussions via Zoom, which was interesting, but it's just a new way of working, and you have to adapt. My grandfather used to say to me that, and it confused me for a long time, the only thing that stays the same is change, and I never ever understood what he meant. you know, by the time I hit 40, I think I realised what it meant, but it was long gone by that time. But you have to change your ways. And all of the ways we did this were really quite interesting and incredible. But the choice of manufacturer has pleased us because they delivered absolutely everything that they said they would deliver. So we've got the buses here bang on time, exactly to the same specification we wanted, and they're out and they're running. And it's quite incredible, actually, because all of these plans that I'm telling you about, you know, the training and the hassle-free element of it, and the lack of parts that you need in your store, and the fact that they don't come into the workshop, we've now got engineers walking about looking for work, which is great, because then we can get them upping the quality of the diesel and getting them into training, because releasing people for training is always difficult. So that side of it so far is great, because when you buy a new diesel bus, let me tell you, that is not the experience. When you buy a new diesel bus, it's in and out the workshop like a yo-yo. Fiddler's elbows, my engineers would say, up and down like a fiddler's elbow. And then after about 3 months, you've debugged it all and you've got it all the way you want it, and then you get into some even running. Electric's not like that, it would seem. Electric just comes and does what your iPhone does. You take your iPhone out of the box, you plug it in, and it just kind of works. Amazing. So here's to the iPhone generation, I'll tell you. I'm starting to feel like a dinosaur, but this does just seem to work. In terms of what do they do in range, I know some of you, speaking to a few people before they start here today, and I'm just watching my time. Dan, kick me off, just pull me off when you want to take me off. These vehicles were delivered from Castleford, 230-something miles, arrived here on one charge with 37% charge left in them. Close your ears, Arron. We tested one to destruction last week. We took one to an area that it wasn't meant to go to, and we put it on a long interurban motorway service that runs from Largs down in the coast, in the west coast, up through a coastal road into a town, does a town service, then goes onto the motorway, drives in the motorway all the way up to Glasgow, then does some city centre stuff, and it did it all day. And they managed to send it out with only 85% charge in it. It did its job from early in the morning till late at night. Didn't have much left in it by the time it got back. And we're not telling you which bus it is, Arron. You probably know. Yeah, no, he knew before we knew. But it did it. 233 miles on an 85% charge with some left in it. And then we found out that the driver had inadvertently switched the regeneration off. So it did that all day without regeneration, which is quite incredible. That should add something like 40% to your battery range in a normal environment. On that environment, probably not. So let's say, for saying sake, half it, because it spent half its time in the motorway. But even so, it's quite impressive. So battery technology and electric vehicles nowadays are right up there. Suddenly, they're right up there. Just want to say a quick word about hydrogen, because we've got 12 double-deck hydrogens coming into the Dundee depot next year, and that is part of a European Union JIVE project. And I'm not going to say too much about that, other than it just shows you how fast technology is moving, because this only 18 months ago was seen as a proof of concept type project within the EU, and the EU were happy to fund it. So European Union, Scottish Government, Transport Scotland, Dundee City Council, and a number of other partners are taking a battery electric bus, taking the batteries out, putting a fuel cell in, fuel tanks, smaller battery, putting them into service, and over 5 years we'll prove the concept. And the time it's taken to get all of that done, we've now got 2 manufacturers selling standard zero-emission hydrogen vehicles, and I drove one of them on Monday of this week. That's how fast things are moving, and I have to say, it was a good experience driving that bus. It just felt like a battery electric bus, you know. So things are moving really fast. And that's the other thing I would say, is keep up. Because if you don't keep up, you'll get left behind, you know. When I was in the forces, you always tried to be at the front of the run, because if you weren't at the front of the run, you were going to be at the back of the run, and then you'd be doing even more than you were meant to do. You don't want to be at the back of this queue. So what have we learned, just quickly? Well, that nothing's impossible for a good team. Russell's sitting over there thinking I've bumped my head, because I'm not one to fawn over people, you know, and I drive myself hard, so I tend to drive my team hard, but I've got an excellent team round about me. You know, if you've got a good team, you can achieve anything. And I've got a good team, and they've delivered a fantastic solution here. Not just my own team, but the partners that we've chosen as well. But also have a good plan B and a good plan C, because sometimes you need it. I had to dip into the plan B for a few days, but we get back on track. Make sure you've got a good backup. And find the celebrations and celebrate. I've got some things here that you've maybe read online, and for us this is a bit of fun, right? We're not trying to, beat our chest and do the big PR thing. This is a bit of fun because people need to celebrate. And the interest this is stoked within the bus community, but amongst our staff is really quite incredible. It really is. The engagement with staff has been incredible. So there's a number of ways we engage with our staff. You've got the old-fashioned, hey up, how's it going? All right, yep, great, brilliant, good to see you. And we've got a lot more technical means as well. I'll get out there, platform talks. I'll get out one day a week and get out and meet people on the bus and walk around the workshops and go to offices and see people. We've got an app called Blink, which is an intranet, but it's in your pocket, it's in your mobile phone. We communicate through that, and it's really well used. It's like an in-house social media, And then there's a chap that runs this really good Facebook group just for McGill's enthusiasts. But some of the things that we did, largest operator of EV buses in Scotland. Well, come the 1st of November, that'll actually be true, so we could say it, right? So we celebrated that, and it gave people something to celebrate. Yay! We'll be operating more electric buses in Scotland than all other operators together. Actually, that'll be true at the 1st of November. First Glasgow will throw us to the side of the road when they start getting deliveries next year. But at the 1st of November, when COP starts, that's true. Operator of the largest EV charging infrastructure in Scotland. Not entirely certain that's true. But we must be right up there because we've got 3 2-kilowatt charging facilities there. So we're operating a real old chunky amount of charging infrastructure there. But we thought we would say it anyway to give the staff something else to celebrate. And in terms of percentage of zero emissions in the fleet, we've got the largest percentage of zero emission buses in our fleet as at 1st of November. And the other things that we were saying was we beat TfL to the 10% target by a year, all of this kind of thing. So it's important to celebrate as well with your staff, and that it drives that engagement forward. As in a tool to engage the local communities, local politicians, policymakers, it's been fabulous as well. The interest has been really quite incredible. It means that Renfrewshire, which is, we're in Renfrewshire now, the ancient royal borough of Renfrewshire, that's where we're sat right now. It's right next to Glasgow. It houses Glasgow Airport. It's the biggest town in Scotland, and it's got a fabulous bus service. But they've got more electric buses, and they operate more electric bus miles than anywhere else in Scotland. And they suddenly woke up to that and thought, here, this is great. We can use this as a springboard to try and drive our zero emission credentials and our net zero drive. So it's given them a fresh impetus. It's given local communities a fresh impetus about cycling, wheeling, active travel, all of that kind of thing as well. And the dialogue has changed around to having micro park and ride sites near bus stops where people can do the first mile and park their car in safety and get onto the bus, and looking at bus infrastructure. So it drives the conversation. And I tell you what, see, as an industry, if we're going to survive, we need to change the narrative. We need to somehow get people out of cars. And we need to have an attractive product to do that. We need to give people a reason to do that. And that's the carrot. There's also going to have to be a stick. So we need to give the policymakers, local authorities in the main, something, some heart to say, right, okay, this is the right thing to do, and we're going to have to put some restrictions in on cars. Otherwise, it's a long, slow death, and it'll be a long, slow, expensive death compared to the long, slow diesel death that we were going to have. So I know we're going to have questions later on, so we'll skip over this, and I'll make Ian Downie happy that we've got a picture of a Pelican Yutong up on the screen. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's all right. Good morning, everybody. Isn't it great to be in public and actually talking and meeting people? So, let's talk about our part of the journey. So I'm Ian Downie. I'm head of Yutong Bus in the UK, working for Pelican Engineering, and we represent the Yutong brand in the UK itself. So you've all heard of Pelican, I'm sure, but I'll give you a few details about Pelican itself. You can see there it's founded in 1919, so we've actually celebrated 102 years of continuous business. The business that we've set up is based upon customers. We support customers in their transport requirements, and that's either goods transport or people transport. We have 160 employees, and we have 3 strands to our business. One is we're a DAF truck franchise, concentrate on service and parts. We're MAN truck franchise, again, concentrate on the aftermarket. And we've also have Yutong, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail. We say we're customer-centric. That's easy to say. We don't have a production plant here in the UK, but we look after our customers. And we can evidence that because if we look at DAF, we became the service dealer of their year in 2017. And the same year, 2017, MAN gave us that same accolade. And that's based upon the service performance we've given to our customers. That's the first time that those 2 brands have actually given that to one dealer. And in 2018, they did it again. So we look after our customers, and that's a common theme about all the employees we have. We're a UK-owned company. It's a family company, so the shareholders are all in the UK. And we're the 3rd generation of the family, the Crump family, and we have Richard Crump, our Managing Director and owner, with us today. We've been importing the Yutong products since 2014. We signed a contract with them in 2013. So Yutong, who are they? They're the world's leader in buses and coaches. They're a bus and coach manufacturer. They do the complete vehicle. We don't produce chassis, we don't produce bodies, we don't produce trucks, we don't produce batteries. We produce buses and coaches. And when I say about buses and coaches, that ranges on a product range between 5 metres to 18 metres. Diesel, Euro 4, Euro 5, Euro 6, gas vehicles, hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. So it's the full gambit. So we're number 1 with 16% of the world's market share on buses and coaches. In China, where our production facility is, for the 16th consecutive year, we're number 1 in that market as well, with a market share of 35%. We have the largest production facility in the world. Let's try and visualise what that actually means. So, anybody Man United fan? No? Liverpool fan, that's better. Well, so you imagine Anfield, you imagine Twickenham, times that by 502 times, and that's the square mileage of our production facility alone. That's the scale of the actual business. The average daily production of buses and coaches coming out of that factory this month is 230 vehicles a day. And that's going to over 150 different countries. They're not all the same specification. I've said 5 metres to 18 metres, all the different drive lines. That's the amount of vehicles that are being produced today. And Matthew was saying about electric vehicles and it's new. Well, it is to the UK. Daniel, you put the figures up there to say, you know, it's growing rapidly, but it's a learning curve for everybody. We built our first electric bus in 1999. 1990, God, we were good. We were really early adopters there. We now have over 122,000 zero-emission vehicles in service. So 10 years, 22 years of production experience, 122,000. 25.6 billion kilometres of mileage is under that belt. So the vehicles that McGills are getting are tried, tested and proven in lots of different operating conditions, lots of different environments, lots of different temperatures. I mean, 25.6 billion. No wonder they go out from day one, because all the issues are being ironed out. And if I just look at electric vehicles within China last year, we're also the market leader on that. We're just short of 16,000 vehicles produced and delivered to customers, and that gave us a 26% market share. Here in the UK, we produced our first sale to Cropley's of a Euro 5 diesel coach. So we have diesel coaches. So the bottom right-hand side, you see the TC9, the GT12 and the GT13. We've got over 600 of those vehicles in service now around the UK, and we're supporting those vehicles as we speak now. But we've also concentrated, and we made a decision on buses. We could have bought diesel buses, we could have bought hydrogen fuel cell buses, but we concentrated on electric vehicles because we want to make sure that we can support them properly within the aftermarket. We don't want to have lots of different options. We want to be able to concentrate and give the service that our customers demand. So we have a TCE 12, which is an electric coach, an electric E12, which is 12.2 metres overall length, the E10, which is its baby brother, 10.9 metres, an airside electric vehicle, and that's one that's at Newcastle Airport as we speak, and later on next year we'll be actually having an electric double deck as well. Things have changed a bit from when we first started having a look at electric buses. So how do we bring a new product to the marketplace here in the UK? We bought a demonstrator, we built it in 2016, and then we put it onto demonstration in 2017. That demo went to 35 different operators and completed 150,000 kilometres. The vehicle itself was tried, tested and proven. It was extremely reliable. The feedback from the customers was great. But we wanted to get feedback, positive and negative, from the customers. So in July 2018, it came up to McGill's and had a demonstration for a couple of weeks in service. And we listened and we took back what our customers said. And we decided to do two things. There were certain things we weren't going to change, and there were certain things we were going to change. What we didn't change is an integral vehicle. We could have had a chassis, given it to a bodybuilder, but no, we wanted an integral vehicle because you need to have that structure in place, you need to have ownership of all the different control systems to optimise the vehicle, and more about that in a minute. When we first brought it in, there was lots of discussions about AC or DC. I'm never into that type of music, but in terms of charging, we only offer DC charging. And that was a conscious decision, and that cost us sales. Because people were saying, look, well, AC, it's cheaper, but DC is safer. DC allows you to also upgrade in the future. So our vehicles going forward can be charged with a single charge point, a charge point on both sides. It can be charged at 240 kilowatts with an upgraded battery management system, and we can also fit pantographs. All of those are DC associated. So we kept with DC. There's also two different battery chemistries available, lithium iron phosphate and NCM as well. We stay with our LFP, lithium iron phosphate, because it's safer. The thermal runaway of LFP is around 600 degrees. With NCM, it's between 200 to 300 degrees. So LFP is twice as safe as NCM. And that's important to us because we're very much into the safety of the vehicles. Because we're actually taking 70 passengers, we have to make sure that those vehicles are as safe as possible. We also then looked at what we could change. So that vehicle had Yutong seats, Yutong flooring, Yutong destination gears. And the comments from the customers was, we'd like to be able to do, we want different colours, we want different fabric, we want different seats. You need to actually go back and talk to Yutong and get them to agree to fit more UK recognised items. So the vehicle on the right-hand side is now the McGill's vehicle. You see there's a few changes in the way that it looks. So one of the aspects is we wanted to have a roof cowl because we wanted to have a sleeker appearance that was on the vehicle. So we fitted roof cowls. Ralph wanted a different flooring, so we fitted ultra flooring in the choice of what he wanted. We wanted Chimera fabric on the seats, two different options. The headrest had to be embossed with McGill's. Alphatronics had to supply the USB chargers, which are branded with McGill's. The seats, let's have Esteban seats. So we offer those as well. We fitted Shore CT TV, and we also fitted Mobitat destination gear. All things that are recognised by the UK industry. It means it's a standard upon the product range, so we've taken the best of both worlds. We've got the best vehicle with all the safety features and all the items that I've talked about, and we've also got are really good UK specified, recognised components on those vehicles as well. What we also didn't change, we didn't change the drive motor. So we have a single drive motor running through a prop shaft to a ZF rear axle. A simple drivetrain. But we also listened to our customers and they said, look, we've had electric vehicles in the past and the range is poor. We've had hybrids and the batteries fail. We need to actually, how can you actually take that range anxiety? What can you give us confidence about this vehicle and how it's going to perform? So we work with Yutong, we work with our battery manufacturer CATL, who also, if you've got a BMW iCar, CATL batteries are in that. Tesla also use CATL, as do Volkswagen, so it's a recognised battery manufacturer, second in the world. That vehicle on the left-hand side had 295 kilowatts of batteries on it. The vehicles now are 422. The vehicle on the left-hand side had air-cooled batteries. The one on the right-hand side is water-cooled. That's safer, but it also means that the batteries are working at the optimal temperature. That means there's more durability within that, and that's why we can offer an 8-year warranty on our traction batteries. We also need to get our passengers back on buses. So our standard offering on our single deck has air conditioning. We've never fitted a diesel heater, and we never will, because our vehicles are full zero emission. That aircon is very important because it attracts people onto vehicles. And Ralph, even on the demonstrator, you had people ringing through asking, when is that vehicle coming past my house or past my bus stop? Not because they wanted to ride on a zero-emission vehicle, they wanted that aircon. I was a bit like this whether or not I should actually show this slide because it talks about the energy efficiency of our product. But in the spirit of we're all trying to learn and we're trying to work on zero-emission vehicles, we've agreed that we're actually going to share this chart with people. This is since August when we first delivered our first production 422 kilowatt-hour battery to Newport. That's on the left-hand side. And then we delivered another 50 plus vehicles. And this is the energy consumption that's being used on that vehicle, or on that range of vehicles. So it's a full year of data. It represents 2 million kilometres of service. And it actually provides the evidence that you've done of the 230 plus miles with 85% charge. So the range that we have on our vehicles, depending upon the energy efficiency, ranges between 337 kilometres up to 463 in that first year of operation. And we also have the 8-year warranty, and we guarantee a state of health at the end of that 8 years. So this is year 1, but we can also work on up to year 8 and 9. We're very proud of those figures, and one of the reasons why we have those figures is because we're a complete vehicle manufacturer. We take ownership of all those service elements, all the different components. We make sure that they work, we optimise them, and that's the type of range and the type of energy efficiency we have. It's not just about the range though. What that means is that when they have to be refuelled, you're using less energy. And also because less energy is being used, the grid structure can actually be lowered as well. So there's 2 or 3 wins by having good energy efficiency. Because we do the work with Yutong, the vehicle comes from Yutong in a complete state. Not a complete state, in a finished state. Before you slip there. So the vehicle is fully tested. It has effectively 3 Olympic swimming pools of water poured over it to make sure there's no leaks anywhere. It goes around our own test track, so we know that it works and it performs before it then goes on the vessel to come across here to the UK. And we work with all our suppliers to say, right, if you're sure CCTV, let's do all the cable runs in the production facility. Let's drill the holes in the production facility. Let's put the aerials in production. And then we do the final fit and finish here in the UK. So we fit the seats, we fit the hand poles, we fit the CCTV, the destination gear, the passenger information systems, the driver's seat, if there's a different seat specified. But we also then commission the vehicle, we do the PDI, we do any custom adaptations, and then we upskill the operators, staff, the drivers, the engineers, the shunters. And we put them through a program of different training because we want to upskill people in the locality where those vehicles are actually in operation. And we also then allow, if the operator wants to, for the warranty to actually be completed by those trained people. So we're upskilling the whole areas where all these vehicles are going to. There's drivers, engineers who are learning how to actually work on those vehicles. Well, what about the temperature? Because it's quite hot here. And it's also, when we talk about engagement, seeing engineers' faces when they actually look at an electric vehicle and they say, well, where's the engine? Do you mean I don't have to take the five-way seat at the back out to get to anything? Where's the oil? What filters do I need to change? They're now saying, where do I put my laptop in? So you're actually getting a new lease of life with engineers and attracting different people into this industry because the vehicles are different. And like Blue Peter, this is what I did earlier. So on the left-hand side is how a McGill's vehicle came to us. On the right-hand side is it fully finished and completed. Zoom meetings. What we've done with McGill's and with other operators is we build one vehicle early. And then we have the Zoom meeting with remote control Charles, who we direct around the vehicle to actually see all the different components. It's a really good way of doing it. And the feedback we've had from all operators, and McGill's including, was really, really good about the fit, the finish, the standard of the production facility is absolutely second to none. But on our first Zoom meeting with Ralph, you commented and said, it's really good in, but I don't like that rear destination. It's too small. Can you not just try and do something about it? So we said, okay, we're not going to commit to anything yet. Let's actually have a look at it. So that's the screen grab of the Zoom meeting at the rear destination. So you see the little box in the centre, the little black box? That's the destination gear. Our engineers went, we can't move all of that. We've got fuse boxes there. We've got a couple of control units. There's nowhere else we can really put it. So we said, engineering team, procurement team, production team, and ourselves. And I rang up Ralph, I know it took too long, 12 hours later, and said, we're going to redesign that back end for you. And that rear destination screen is now 5 times the size of the other one because we were responsive and flexible with a customer's requirements. That's actually quite a nice picture because it also shows that the energy compartment and all the different components that seem to be missing. We open that sometimes and people say, is it finished? There's no real components there, but that's a zero-emission electric vehicle. So production facilities. We don't have a production facility in the UK. We use Yutong. We've talked about the size. We've talked about the capacity. That means that there's a real flexible approach in terms of customers' requirements. The first McGill's vehicle was delivered in June. The next 21 were delivered over a 3-week period last month. And the next 33 will be delivered starting Friday onwards at 4 every 3 or 4 days. So on the left-hand side, the picture there is a vehicle in E10, a one-off for National Power, operating at Whiteley Wind Farm in Glasgow. We then have the 55 McGills as an example, and there's over 100 E12s that are going to Qatar, part of the 1002 order that's going for the World Cup. So the volume, the production capacity means that we can look after one-off customers and people with vast volumes as well. We talked about buses. We also have our TCE interurban bus and coach. That's a full zero-emission vehicle. It's the only one available in the UK, and it actually has a ULEB certificate, so it's recognised within Scotland as being able to be eligible for funding for SULEB and the other grants that are available. We have options of two different battery sizes. It can be full PSVAR, identical driveline to the buses. The only difference is the axle ratio changes. Those vehicles at Ember Core are doing 24,000 kilometres a month. So in terms of a zero emission, people might say, well, it's only suitable for certain applications. That's a coach. That's used that type of quantities. That's National Express type of ranges. And here in the UK, we've been pretty busy as a team, and that shows all the different customers across the length and breadth of the UK and Ireland who have taken vehicles and are having vehicles delivered to them over the past 12 months. So there's nearly 200 single-deck vehicles, coaches and buses. The reason I'm putting this slide up is not just to say about this. Every one of those operators will be more than willing to have a conversation with anybody about their experiences to try and de-risk people who might be embarking upon a zero-emission journey. There's a nice picture of some McGills going down the production line. Very nice production line as well, very clean. So if there's any questions or queries now or afterwards, we'll be delighted to talk to you about it. And with that, I'll hand you over to my colleagues at Zenobe. Thanks very much.
I had asked for a box, but apparently I didn't get one, so hopefully you can see me at the back. Right. So my name's Arron Dowie. I'm one of the business development directors at Zenobe Energy. I'm going to be touching on what Zenobe do, and then I'll be handing over to my colleague Richard, who will talk you through what he's done from a delivery manager within Zenobe and looking after the McGill sites. So before I start that, I want to share a story with you. So you're probably wondering why I've showed that with you, and it's quite simple. I think, A, I like the video, and secondly, I think it underpins who Zenobe are. So we are a business that is solely focused on making clean energy more accessible. This is via battery energy storage. We started life as a company providing large-scale batteries for National Grid, doing assistance with balancing the network, taking green energy and putting it back in when it becomes required. This is becoming more and more important as we move to more renewable energy, that the network needs more balancing. And we were one of the first people to do this in the UK in 2016 with putting a battery on a wind farm. So we quickly saw that the transport network required our services, and in particular around how we run critical infrastructure. So, sorry, this isn't moving forward. I can't read it. Apologies. Yeah. Sorry, my notes are stuck on the screen. So we quickly saw the transport sector required knowledge of running critical infrastructure, and overcoming these issues, we're getting grid to either urban areas or remote areas was proving a problem. So we've taken our understanding of that, and
it's not touchscreen.
It's not, I know it's not touchscreen. Mine's touchscreen, so I can just flick it, which makes things a lot easier. So bus depots were basically built. We're never envisaging needing so much power into that situation. So we've worked with we've taken our understanding of critical infrastructure and from the National Grid, and we've applied it into the bus sector. And finally, you've just seen here we're deploying our second life batteries. So we understand that going forward that there's going to be a certain number of bus batteries that need to come off of vehicles in the future that at the moment most people aren't accounting for what needs to happen to them. So as per the video, what we're doing now is solving a problem that circa 7 to 9 years away, we will have a proven technology and a proven reuse of this equipment that has a future life in a more sustainable circular economy, which is what we're about. So I don't want to dwell on this slide too much, but this is kind of the journey that we've had from Zenobe. We're a relatively new company. We're only really known in certain niche areas and markets, so we're not as well known as some of the DNOs or large contractors or other entities that you've probably come across. So I don't want to focus on too much of it, but for me, the key area here is in 2020, we had an investment from Infra Capital. Now, Infra Capital are a subsidiary of M&G. Again, you may not know this, but they invested £150 million equity in our business. M&G are a £300 billion asset company. So whilst we don't have the brand and the name that you may know from, you know, the DNOs, etc., we have this financial firepower now and a company who are committed to developing and investing in sustainability. They are committed to our 2025 aspirations. So this is going to be a pain. So it's no, I can't. Sorry. Secondly. The 150 million equity means that we have, with our debt arrangement, roughly 300 to 500 million pounds to invest in EV technology and into our partners. Now, that's primarily going to be invested in the UK, and it's primarily going to be invested in the UK bus market. But what that means is we can match whatever aspirations our customers have. So whilst, again, we're a small niche company, not very big, not very well known, we have the firepower and the financing to be able to move forward. So we do this with some key products. I'm only going to talk to you about the products that we are offering to McGill's and what the McGill's have taken. So I will, and McGill's have taken a brave step of actually doing 3 bus depots at one go. I don't know anyone else in the market who've done that at this point in time. So financing. So financing is a key area for us. We saw, my background is in financing, as a couple of other people, and we saw that there was a key area of one of the problems of making that change is making the difference between a diesel and an electric vehicle more palatable to accept from a financing perspective. So I'll touch on it in a bit more detail, but what we've tried to do is make that change as small as possible. Secondly, we've looked at smart charging. So smart charging, our charging software allows operators to not have to install such large grid connections because we dynamically load manage, which means we can charge the same number of buses on a lower connection. That helps reduce cost effectively. We also try to optimize the charging so that the batteries on the vehicles are not fast charged, as Ralph touched on. You don't want a battery that's fast charged that degrades too quickly. So our charging software is in place so that we charge it at the slowest speed possible to protect the battery and basically improve its extended life. That's in our interest because if we're financing it all, we want it to operate and work in as best as it can. And secondly, and lastly, we also look at optimizing when we use the charging. So if you go in and you plug in at 6 o'clock at night, you're using the most expensive power. What we want to do is to allow you to charge at the most optimal time, taking the cheapest power, which again knocks on to using the lowest OPEX that you can from running the opportunity of the vehicles. Software. So again, software is tied into the dynamic charging, but for us, the smart charging is also a customer portal, which gives McGill's and other turnkey customers a holistic view of what they're able to do from a charging perspective to an EV bus. Now, what that means is it enables our clients to proactively manage what's happening at their fleet rather than reactively. So it's about having foresight to what's going to happen rather than it's gone wrong, something's happened, it's stopped working. Again, we provide this, and it's something that we've developed with partnership with different OEMs, in partnership with all our customers. We're constantly developing it, constantly looking at how we can improve our software, giving the right information to be able to make the right decisions from an operator's perspective. It's something that's grown because it was a happy hazard. We set up our software to run our batteries in the fields, and we've got 78 megawatts. That battery management system that we've created, which National Grid have accepted, we've then kind of flipped it on its end and make it front-end portal. So it's kind of rigid, it's robust, it's a proven technology, and we're just now making it finessed, so it provides what EV companies and bus companies require. So, as I said, we've got 3 core products on financing. We have 3 contracts. charging service agreement. What we've seen one of the barriers for people to take on EV is having to add that additional cost of putting in charging equipment that you wouldn't have with a diesel. So what we do is we design, install, manage and finance that facility for up to a 15-year period. We cover O&M, we cover the whole eventuality of what that charger does. So from a perspective of your company, you don't have to actually come out with a CapEx until it works. Until we prove and it works and we charge the vehicles, you don't pay us a penny. We fund it over 15 years, again, so that's to match the useful life of potentially what it is and to spread the cost over a longer period. As we said, off the back of that, because we're battery specialists, the batteries that are on the vehicles are not too dissimilar to the batteries that are in the fields. Same companies make them, one are mobile, one are static in basic terms. So then we looked at it and said, well, actually, if we are charging your vehicle and we're maximising its use and making sure it's got the longest possible utilisation, those batteries will work for us in our second life. So actually, why don't we finance the batteries on the vehicles and give a guarantee for up to 15 years that the battery on your vehicle will do the mileage and the duty that's required? Now that means from a financing perspective and from your cash flow perspective, you're not having to find a lumpy battery cost at some point in time when it fails or can't do the length. Effectively, the battery is a shrinking fuel tank, and at some point it's not optimal to have it on your vehicle. So we finance that over 15 years or up to 15 years, depending on what you want. Again, the other benefit of this is it can be off balance sheet. So this isn't CapEx for your business, this is OpEx. So again, if depending where you sit and how you're balancing your books and how you're wanting to present to the stock market or whatever it may be, this is a different option that takes it away from being a capital expenditure today to being an operational cost going forward. And then as a happy hazard of doing all this, we thought we might as well do the chassis at the same time. So we can do the chassis, do a whole complete vehicle over 15 years. The idea is that matches your depreciation, the useful life of it, and that then effectively at the end of 15 years you can get rid of it or cascade it onto the next operator. So that's how we've designed our facility, and as we said, what we've done is we've spoken to people around what their depreciation is, how they operate it, what their plans are, and we've tried to model it as best as we can to fit with what the requirements are. Software. As I said, I touched on this a bit. This has been a bit, as I said, this is a bit that's kind of constantly evolving and something that we hadn't. When we started, we were people that knew infrastructure, we knew how to put infrastructure in and we knew how to run it. From there, we then decided that actually we can manage the batteries on the vehicles. This has kind of come off the back of that and is quite an important part going forward. I've taken some screenshots, but effectively our software is 24/7 managed. So when we're running our charging software in depots, if there is something that goes wrong, the first point of call is one of the people on our desk will call up your depot or call up your centre and say, hey, by the way, charger number 4 isn't working, we don't really understand why, can you go and have a look at it? Reason behind this is we do not want your vehicle to not be charged when you need to use it in the morning. Part of what we do as a service is we provide a guarantee that your vehicle will be charged when you need it. Now I think we're the only ones in the market to do that at the moment, so we put our money where our mouth is. We work out what the charging plan is, we work out how it's going to work, and we say, yes, your vehicle will be charged at 6 a.m. or whatever time. If we fail, that's down on us, and we have to pay damages back to you for not honouring our contract. To do that, you obviously need to plug the vehicles in, which helps, and you'll be amazed at how many times that is a problem, that the vehicle hasn't been charged, plugged in. It's kind of like the IT thing, we need to switch it on and switch it off again. And that probably makes up 80% of the problems we ever have. At the moment, our software has a 98.8% uptime, which means we haven't dropped miles. We've not, and this has been for 2.5, 3 years. We've not had any instances where customers had to claim any money off us for not providing our service. What you can see on the top left-hand corner is the depot overview. So this is, if you have multiple sites like McGill's, you will have 3 kind of depot views that you can see. It's monitoring what's coming in from a power perspective, what's been consumed, how it's all operating. So it's a quick, easy check, 6 green lights, you know everything's working properly. If you go to the bottom right corner, you've got zones. And again, this has come from conversations with operators. If you have diesel vehicles coming in, you don't really care where they're parked. Electric vehicles need to be on their charge as soon as possible to ensure that they get the time to be charged. So we've designed this and it works in tandem with how you operate. You can see it gives you a state of charge. You can see it monitors vehicles on the road to tell you that the vehicles are coming up to power or not, don't have enough power. And it also has a bottom indicator that says, you're not charging, your bus is back, why have you not put it into charge? You've been there 60 minutes. Again, in a diesel fleet, it's about changing evolution of minds. In a diesel fleet, it doesn't matter if it doesn't get plugged in or topped up because it's got a whole 8 hours. With what we're trying to do is we're trying to change the culture in the depot, give it easy demonstration of how it works, and make it visual so that people know when to change change the vehicles over. Evolution, you see at the top, driver performance. We get this off of the vehicle, so we're looking at how drivers drive efficiently even. And the rationale to this is when we started with our Stagecoach depot 2.5–3 years ago, we saw some major differences between how the vehicles operated. And again, lead foot would have been what you'd have said previously with diesel. The variation between someone driving efficiently and inefficiently is 30%. So we can monitor this, we can show it, and we can allow you to train your drivers, if there's an educational, like what's someone doing better, how is it working, how can this improve efficiency, lower OPEX, give you a better return on your investment. The heat map at the bottom, again, shows areas where there might be problems in the local area. So if you're driving around a particular city centre and there's a point where it constantly consumes more energy, well, this might be a conversation you want to have for the local authority to say, can you move the bus stop 20 metres because it's at the top of a hill and it causes us a lot of problem. So it's that kind of information that might be useful going forward to allow you to make the right decisions as to how to run the service. And the only final bit is we also rate each individual bus, and this is this level of information is quite important. As Ian touches on about efficiencies, what we should be able to see here is you get a benchmark of data, and if you have a fleet of 100 or 200 vehicles, you want to know which one is the outlier. Why is bus number 4 not charging at the same rate as this bus? So again, it's preempting any possible issues, so you can reactively deal with problems, not take buses off the road when they actually have a problem. So none of this is possible unless we're able to deliver on site, build something and make sure it works. So as I said, Richard is our project manager for McGill's, and I'll hand over to him now to talk you through what we've actually done in McGill's.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Richard Kapelko. I'm the project manager, delivery project manager for Zenobe, responsible for the McGill's buses projects. So just go into this, and we are live. Quick video. I can tell you right now, it's never that easy. So that was us energising and Chin Insight. That happened quite quickly. So I think Scottish Power and Schneider are in the room just now. Can you put your hands up? There we go. It wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for our supply partners and getting that actually to go live. So obviously McGill's are currently going live with 3 depots at the same time. As Arron mentioned, that's a first for EV sort of sector in terms of getting that kind of infrastructure in place and on time. Obviously we've got 34 chargers in total going in. They're DC 120 kilowatts from Feehong. We've got the 64 buses in total, 68 sorry in total, and each site is getting a 1.5 MVA supply brought in. Now we've overspec'd the equipment that's going into these sites just so that we can accommodate for future increase in loads for the power. So obviously we've got a collaborative design process where we basically go through the entire process with the client and we'll design the bus depots to their requirements. Now this design slightly changed from the initial concept when we first started McGill's off. So we've now got a slight angle on the buses. That was to counter for the turning circles of the buses to get in. Down the bottom left hand side we've got the ring main unit, and then the substation next to it and our LV switch room container. So this is the site that you're going to be going to visit after this when we get on the bus. Next slide. So plan to succeed, not to fail. It's kind of standard project management wording that I go with. So obviously we've got here the legals, the construction, the electrical, the networking, and then the software. Those are the 5 key parts to the EV bus depots that we deploy. So keys to a successful project obviously is going to be constant communication. So the communication I got from Russell on a day-to-day basis is probably what made the project so successful to allow us to get to this mark where we are just now to get into COP26. So if it wasn't for Russell and Chris, then we wouldn't have got to where we are now. Planning ahead, so we basically have weekly meetings, so we did, with Russell in the office every week, and we just sit down and plan and work everything around his schedule. And then coming up to the last 2 weeks there, we've had daily meetings at 10 o'clock every day, so it's always working with the client. That's a key to a successful project. Obviously, be involved in your projects. You've got to want to change as well and get that electrification process moving. Couple of issues that we hit, obviously supply chain delays, so COVID-19 related issues and Brexit related issues. I'm getting fed up hearing them. Buried services is also another one, so obviously when you're dealing with construction, you've got a lot of buried services, you don't know what's in the ground, so obviously you've got to do your scanning and all that and make sure that you're planning ahead and marking up everything as you go along. Obviously, unforeseen buried obstacles as well. If you're digging in York, you might find a sword, you don't know, then you have to stop. So complex installs as well. These are classed as complex installs in the EV sector. So I've been working in the EV sector for the last 4 years now. And by far, these are the most complex installs that I've seen in EV and the infrastructure that goes into these and all the complexities that come with it. These are not easy to deliver, but we get there. So obviously, every project has its difficulties. Communication, planning, change of scope as well as a big one, and then scope creep and illegals as well that go with things. So obviously, we've got a picture here. This was the energisation of Inchinnan. So it was quite heavy-handed that day. This was on a Saturday, and we had 18 contractors on site for that. So obviously, Scottish Power and PowerTech, they take health and safety very seriously, so everything was all by the book, ticked. Cost me a lot in sandwiches that day too. Right, so this is Inchinnan. This is banks 1 to 13. This is kind of the process where we road saw out after scanning. Then we strip off the first layer of concrete. This is us then excavating it out, getting ready for the ducts. Then laying of the ducts with the electrical tape with the top of sand on them. Then we've got the reinforcement we put in, and obviously there's always somebody who walks on the wet concrete. So this is the chargers going in, and then this is us getting to the final stages near the end. So you'll see the finished product. It's not 100% there, we're about 90% of the way through. Obviously we had supply chain issues. This is the substation getting installed in site. So it was a very, very heavy piece of equipment. It's 600 kilograms. So we had to go bring in a heavy lift crane for this. And that is the ring main unit there next to the substation, all wired up and ready to go. This is us installing the GRP enclosures, which are in a nice RAL colour of McGill's. And obviously get my hands dirty there too. This is the LV switch container that we bring into site, and that's kind of like the central hub where it disperses all the power out to the chargers. We run the software in there, which then sends the communications back to our back office software. And this is a team. So when we get out to site, if you see these gentlemen on the left, can we just give them a big thumbs up when we see them? And went too far back. Yep, so just want to say a big special thanks. Oh, that's a coffin that Russell had made for me at the beginning of the project, by the way. Big special thanks to McGill's and obviously Fihong, Yutong and Pelican for making this happen and working with us. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you, Richard. Fantastic. Okay, we may have gone slightly over time, but that's not a problem. Hopefully you've all been storing up some questions. Could I invite the speakers just to come and sit at the table, if that's all right? We'll take maybe 10, 15 minutes of questions. Does anyone have any burgeoning questions, or shall I kick us off? Who's ready to go first? Sorry, I'll just grab the...
Yeah, there were some comments made, fascinating comments about training the workforce, and I'd really like to understand how you approach that, given the type of engineers, I suppose the newness of the technology, and perhaps some of the aversion to electrical rather than mechanical vehicles. So, if you could share a little bit about how you approach that would be excellent.
I think it just turns on. You should just...
Well, we've got absolutely no chance of running these if we can't switch a microphone on. You're asking the wrong man. He's sitting right behind you, actually. So you want to nab him and ask him on the bus on the way up to the depot. But the big thing, the overriding thing in all of this with the staff was that they wanted to know they had a future. So some of them have been diesel mechanics all their life, 20, 30 years. Some, fresh out of apprenticeship, young in their career, and they wanted to know they had a future because we're very vocal about the journey. This is it's a big project in terms of a single company swapping over to zero emission vehicles, and we plan to do more. So they're wondering whether they've actually got a job, whether they've got longevity. So the reaction to getting trained and flipping over and upskilling as we sold it to them was very good. I think that's fair to say, Russell.
That's great. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Any more questions? Oh, hey, we've got a few. Do you want to just pass the mic over? Sorry.
We're on. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Andy Hyman at Vattenfall. For Zenobe, you build and operate the infrastructure. Do you own that? Keep the ownership through the 15-year contract, or does it transfer across to McGill's at some point?
It depends on the particular customer, but what we try to do is so that we own and operate it, so therefore all risk, all liability from the switch room to everything sits with us, and that way there's kind of we maintain it, etc. So we can't complain if it's someone else's fault. But we offer HP based facilities so they can take ownership as well. So it all depends on what the customer really needs, but our preference would be to own and operate.
Yeah, so that's the best for the customers, really, isn't it? They can get on with their business.
Well, yeah, I mean,
to worry about the network. Yeah.
Exactly. With the O&M side of it, if we're funding the full turnkey like we are with McGill's, we've got the problem. We adopt the problem of the vehicle and the battery. If there's an issue with it, we have to work to resolve it. We have the connection between the charger and the battery, and we can see what's happening. So we're owning that part of it. There's no pointing fingers to say, well, it's the bus battery, or it's your charger, or it's actually your infrastructure there, because it's all our problem. And that's kind of what we think is what's worked well at the moment, is that Ralph and his team can just drive the buses, provide the service, and do what they want to make the most profitable option as possible. So that's where we feel we have a value add.
That's good. Thank you.
So who's the next question?
Hi there, Paul from Heliox. Question for Zenobe. So we have a colleague who works or used to work for Tesla, and he's claimed Tesla struggled to find a correlation between charging power and battery degradation. Do you have data that suggests that there is a link? You mentioned slow charging. What is the ideal charging rate?
What's the ideal charging rate? There is no such thing as an ideal charging rate. There's an ideal window. So what we're saying is yes, you're right. There's arguably, is there data to say you fast charge at 300 kilowatts, then you're gonna fry your battery? There is no data to say it is or it isn't. But what we're suggesting is you match your charging window, or you match your charging to the window you have available. So if there is no proven result, then why would you want to charge it fast if you don't need to? So the same, why would you drive your car as fast as possible if you can just drive at 30 miles an hour and get to the same destination as you need to? So that's kind of the principle we put into it. And I agree, there is different battery technologies have different degradation, and like you say, there's the jury's out as to how it works. Paul.
Thank you.
Cool.
Just to add that, we don't put a charging requirement in terms of the warranty that we offer.
At the front here, Tim. Thank you.
Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the presentations. Really a question for McGill's. I think anyone working in public transport supply or operation, COVID has been a big worry. You mentioned cars. More and more people have gone back to their cars. Do you think EVs, zero emissions, are going to help stop that? Do you think what's been the reaction from your passengers to the new buses beyond just nicer air conditioning?
It's interesting, actually. We survey a lot. We survey our customers. We feel that we're a very customer-focused company, and you hear a lot of noise around about what the bus user wants. We know what the bus user wants because we ask the bus user. At least we ask the ones that have stayed. You can't ask the ones that have already departed, because we've seen significant footfall decline since the 50s. It's slowed down since the 80s, but still there's been unprecedented footfall decline, and that's been about slower journey times and more expensive journeys and all of that kind of stuff. Will it make people come out of cars? Well, doing the same as we've always done isn't going to get a different result, to coin the phrase. Okay, so we need to do something different. Zero emission does a lot of things, and one thing it does is peak interest. And from our customer surveys, we always knew that zero emission, environment credentials were very low on the list of needs. And that's because they knew they were being green in the first place. So it was very low on the list of needs. Take a diesel bus that's Euro 6, that's actually emitting less NOx than a Euro 6 car with one person in it, and you've maybe got 20, 30, 40 people in it. They know they're a green passenger. So it was always low down in the importance list, never in the top 5. But that's current users. So when you flip it over to asking people why don't they get the bus, you get all of the convenience and cost and all of that kind of stuff. But also in there is the environment, because the non-bus user tends to see the bus as a dirty thing, whereas the bus user sees it as a clean thing. So they see things from the past of black smoke and oily and smelly and all that kind of thing. And that, you know, it takes a time to change perceptions, but those perceptions are changing. And it behoves the bus industry to sell that message as well. We need to do more within ourselves to sell that message, but it's an important message for people that want to get the bus. They want to know they're doing something that's virtuous, that is circular, that is actually going to benefit the economy. And if they take that step of getting out their, you know, highly personal, highly convenient, personal mobility box, then there's going to have to be a reason for it, and it's up to us to sell that message. But it is important to people that don't currently use the bus.
Cheers, thank you.
I think there's one just here.
Nice. Hi there. There's a question for McGill's and Zenobe. I wonder if you could talk a bit more about how the bus depot functions continue to operate during the installation of the equipment. If there were any temporary moving out of buses or resources that had to happen, and if there's been any impact on the overall parking space available at the depot since the infrastructure was put in. Thank you.
Thanks for that. It works very well, actually, and it's down to what Richard said in his presentation, communication. It's down to talking to each other, and I know that the teams are talking to each other because they make it work. It's not easy. Turning a bus, one of the big problems with any operational site, whether it's a bus company, a haulage or logistics company or a warehouse, when you need to change that around about a live operation, it's almost impossible because you need the space that you've got unless you happen to be in a depot that's bigger than you need. So one of the things we've had to do is slightly change the parking plan. And we've had to segregate a safe working area for Zenobe and their contractors in order to do the civil works. And some days it's been like loosely controlled chaos, but it's worked. But it's also important to make sure that our staff are on board with the message and that they're getting an understanding of what's going on as well, that it's not normal. In terms of safety in the heavy transport industry, whether it's haulage or buses, of over 80% of the deaths and serious injuries that happen in the depot. So it's a dangerous place to work. So safety is paramount. So that constant communication is the key to all of making this work. I'll pass over to Richard because he'll see it from the other side.
Yeah, so basically it goes back to what I was saying, working with and not against. It's kind of a two-way window as well, where it goes both ways, because we've got to work with McGill's, but they've also got to work with us. So as long as that communication line's continuously open, and in the evenings, what we would do is we'd actually tidy everything away so it was all contained in the section that we were allocated, and we wouldn't leave any plan or anything lying around so that they could get the full access of the buses back into the depot. But yeah, it was good. It was an interesting process.
Thank you.
Add a wee addendum to the answer to that. It also involves being flexible. So, for example, when the bulk of those things are being done and you're adding different lining and you're having to burn off parking and you need a bigger space within the depot, there's a lot of drivers' cars involved. So being flexible, Russell Henderson, our engineering director, went and spoke to the priest at the local church. The car park's not used Monday through Saturday, so struck a deal with them to use the car park for staff so they could park their cars at the local church and then walk along to the depot rather than park in the depot to give the contractors a wee bit more space. So flexibility, there's usually an answer somewhere in the mix, but flexibility is key.
Thanks for that.
I think the chap just next to you.
Fascinating to hear from you all this morning. An observation perhaps, it's very encouraging to hear that Yutong can probably provide the entire EV need for the 50% for Scotland within 2 working weeks, unless my maths has let me down. The second one is, as an occasional steering wheel attendant, I'm quite intrigued regarding what good and bad driving, or good and less good driving, might be for an EV.
Right, thanks very much for that question. What we do is, part of the training is not just the engineers, it's also the drivers, because it's a different way of actually driving a vehicle. The regeneration that you can gain from braking and approaching the driving characteristics in a different way can actually make anything between 10 to 40% more energy could be harvested if the vehicles are driven correctly. They're very smooth, very easy to drive, and the driver feedback is actually second to none because they don't have any turbo lag at roundabouts. It's instantaneous torque that's being driven. So that the experience has been really good. For you Go North East, who've got 9 of our vehicles, they've actually seen their accident level half since they started driving because they feel that the drivers have had more training, they have more pride about what they're doing than a conventional vehicle because it does feel as a different vehicle.
Thank you.
I'll give an operator's perspective, Donald. I mean, one of the things we do with diesel vehicles is we've got telematics all over them, you know, so the electric vehicles have also got our telematics on them. They've got the Yutong telematics on them, and they've got Zenobe telematics. So, you know, there are systems, you know, coming out the bus's ears pretty much, so we know exactly what it's going through every moment of its life. I drive an electric vehicle regularly, so I understand what the difference is, and it's a bit of a surprise for some drivers, and it takes a bit of time for them to get used to it. But one of the things that Ian mentioned there, in terms of no turbo lag, you know yourself, you get used to some vehicles, and you try and keep your average speed up. You try not to slow down. You hate someone cutting you up because you lose all your speed, and then you've got to accelerate hard, and your green driving score or credentials go down along with your potential bonus and your ranking in the depot. But with the electric vehicle, it's a very different proposition because of that instant torque situation, and you can tickle it up to speed a lot easier than you can with a diesel. So maintaining speed is easier, and also if you've got to decelerate, I know Ian used the term braking, we call it slowing rather than braking because you're not necessarily touching the brake. You know, you can indulge in one pedal driving. If you go back to the 80s when the old Lancing Bagnall slew hydraulic fork trucks come out with one pedal, you know, you say, how do you do this? Well, you're either going or you're stopping, and it's the one pedal. With electrics, it's much more like that, where you take your foot off on a gradual basis, and that's tunable as well, depending on the route, depending on the terrain. It's a very different environment. The feedback from the staff is first class. They enjoy it. They really, really enjoy it. And part of that is the ambience, you know, the ergonomics of the cab and what they've been used to and what they're going into and all of that kind of thing. So it does make a huge difference. Ask me in 3 months again, then we'll be able to tell you more. Thank you.
Somebody was taking off the drive green observations at Linlithgow Depot because I was ruining their score. That says a lot.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we've got one question at the back there from Joe.
I'd just like to thank you, gentlemen, for your leadership. It's really quite inspiring. And for Ralph, I was wondering if you are considering repowering your legacy fleet to make the transition faster and smoother to electric.
In a word, no. I don't feel that the existing fleet are really up to that job because there's so much more than just having an electric drive motor and a bank of batteries. The vehicle has got so many sensors on it in order to let it function and perform the way we need it to perform that it would just cost too much. So for a legacy vehicle, we would rather try and get what we can get for it in the open market, even if it's only 6 or 7 years old, and flip over into a brand new vehicle. Now, in terms of embedded carbon and all of that kind of stuff, yeah, there are downsides to all of that. You're talking to someone who's in the process of converting a 1966 Mercedes-Benz petrol over to electric propulsion. So I understand embedded carbon and the benefits and all of that, but the downside of that is a bus that started life as diesel It isn't an easy conversion over to electric. It can be done, and it can be done successfully. But for me, I don't want to put my customers through that journey. I would much rather they have a transfer across to a new vehicle, and they really, really understand that this is a zero-emission vehicle. It's a totally different vehicle. The ambience, the air conditioning, the managed temperatures, all of that kind of thing is different. And again, for the new customers, if they just see the same old bus that is suddenly uber clean, they're not going to see the difference. So for me, it's not just about what's possible. It's about selling that message to people and trying to get that virtuous behaviour then within the people that are driving around.
So just maybe a slightly different opinion to Ralph in that we have conversations with many operators, and when you look at the transition from diesel to EV, I personally feel there is a place for repowering the vehicles. If you look at London, there is approximately 2,000 to 4,000 vehicles between a 5 and 7 year age, which in theory will stay in London for another 10 plus years before they're written down as a business. So unless they get cascaded into the regions and then you're just pushing the problem on someone else, there's a rump of vehicles that I think from a financing perspective and a restructuring to make them zero emission to clean the air quickly may be an option that works. There are people out there that can do it and have an option to be able to do it. Like Ralph says, it's making it cost effective to be able to take that kind of bit away. Doing the older ones doesn't, in my view, make much sense, and newer ones also doesn't make sense. So there's a little niche, I think, at this point in time that could work.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got one more question up front.
Just a question to Yutong. Does the bus actually ship with a pack integrated within the bus, or are the two shipped separately?
No, what we do, we produce the vehicle, it goes through our test track, so it's a fully functioning, running vehicle, and then it's shipped with the batteries in situ.
That's from China as well, sorry?
Yes, yeah.
Brilliant. I don't think there are any more questions in the room. We have had a couple from online. One was about the heating impact on the energy consumption. I know you showed the slide there. Ian, do you want to just touch on the impact there?
So we've worked with Zenobe so we can actually preheat the vehicle before it goes out. So that actually helps because you're using grid energy and not battery energy. And then based upon the results we have so far, there's about a 10 to 20% more energy is used when it's in winter months. But it's important to actually set the temperature correctly. So I think we're working around 15 to 16 degrees. So it's warm before it leaves the actual depot, and then it just maintains that temperature. But in terms of where we forecast it, we're probably about 10% better than what we forecast.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think typically people say it's about 30% for the heating, but obviously that's an improvement. That's great. And one other question from online was about total cost of ownership. And I guess, Ralph, you mentioned how much you're investing in new vehicles to start with. But I guess it'd be good to hear from everyone on the panel just on that total cost of ownership in the long term, and do you see the electrics being better over that 15-year period?
Just the last question Ian answered about preheating, that was something that really made our bus drivers' eyebrows go up. Because that winter practice of coming out, you've got your beanie hat on, you've got your overcoat on, you've got your gloves on, you defrost the vehicle if it's outside. Your land of milk and honey in Greenock where they're all stabled inside, but still it's cold and they've got to wait in it heating up. When they realised, preheating, shirt sleeves straight away. Yeah, just that alone is enough to get buy-in. In terms of total cost of ownership, well, obviously the stick in the sand is diesel, what we currently know. And how does that cost of ownership look? One of the reasons we have gone down the road that we did in terms of teaming up with Zenobe for turnkey solutions was to try and get as flat an OPEX load as possible in order to have predictable costs. How it compares to diesel over 15 years, for example, it's not that much different over 15 years. If you bought the bus yourself and didn't partner up with anyone, it could be an extremely lumpy cost with some very big lumps, particularly in regard to batteries and then heavy maintenance halfway through the life. Or you could take a buy it and throw it away view, which would be, in my view, wasteful. but it's not that different from a diesel over 15 years. But there are lots of elements to that. You can't ignore the government funding that comes in. So the government gives you grant funding for some of the difference in price between a diesel and an electric, and then you've also got the difference in operating cost. We had a launch event in Paisley last Thursday night, and I get cornered by two of the local politicians saying, well, hey, it's so cheap to run electric vehicles, are you lowering the fares? Because they're used to understanding that it only costs so much to charge an electric car. But they're not looking at all of the other sides of it in terms of battery maintenance, battery ownership, battery management, all of the uptime guarantees and that.
Yeah. So just on total cost of ownership, if you look at the energy consumption alone, diesel to electric, you're saving between £50 to £70 per day just in that energy consumption. Your maintenance is vastly improved. The reliability, if we look at some of the operations in China, the normal peak vehicle requirements, you have a 10% spur. They operate on 2% spur because the reliability is so much better.
So yeah, I mean, from our side, it's a bit difficult to kind of answer that one in full because obviously, as Ian and Ralph have touched on, obviously ongoing maintenance of the vehicle. We understand that obviously long term it's going to be a lot less because there's less moving parts, etc. The fuel consumption is obviously less. From a cost of financing, the way we structure it over 15 years is obviously longer debt. It means you pay more in the long run. But what we do know is that the market typically would be financing vehicles over 5 or 7 years with a big balloon or an RV position. You then refinance that for another 5 or 7 years and you finance it again. So as long as you're holding that vehicle for a 15-year period, we believe locking in and funding at this point in time from a cost perspective is actually more beneficial than running the risk of refinancing at year 7 or year 8, etc. So once you add that all together, our expectation is the TCO will be lower than the diesel or on parity, which is what we want to try and get to.
Fantastic. Okay.
Sorry, just one other point. I think we should also say that if we've got 8 years warranty on the batteries, then the vehicle with the second life could be 16 years. It could be 20 years because it's less moving parts. So why depreciate the vehicle over 12 or 15 years? Because you're never going to get better than a zero-emission vehicle. And the total cost of ownership doesn't normally include having to go from Euro 4 to Euro 5 to Euro 6 as clean air zones come in. So we also have to factor that effectively you're future-proofing that product now for the future as well.
Sorry, can I step in a bit? So the other aspect of it is we obviously, from Zenobe's perspective, we take a residual value position on the battery. So we're owning it, running it, and at the end of the period that it doesn't work on the vehicle, we repurpose it into another thing. So part of what we want to do and part of what we do around our charging strategy is ensuring that we have the best battery possible and we have the management system to check and track that. And by building that residual value into the proposition, we should pull down the price because you're not buying the whole battery, you're buying the portion that you're using over that period. So that, again, we think is beneficial to the operators going forward.
Fantastic. Can't see any more hands raised. I don't know if any of the speakers want to put in any last final comments before we close.
Yeah, can you please come and have a look at our electric coach as well?
Fantastic.
I have to get some housekeeping notes for those that are going to come up to the depot, and I'd urge you all to do it. Don't